Changing times are forcing traditional publications to reinvent themselves or risk becoming obsolete. I will talk briefly about our days predating the web, the challenges that we had, how we reinvented ourselves, and how those challenges have shaped our present day. The AP is the oldest and most revered news gathering, aggregating, and distributing company in the world. We have a treasure trove of content with roughly about several million articles with archival photos and videos dating as far back as the 1800s. Along with our photos and videos, we have content of all media types: text, graphics, audio clips, and so on. Along with our archival content, we generate roughly about 150,000 unique breaking news items every single day. With this large amount of content, what were some of the challenges we had in digitizing it, rights management issues, revenue sharing problems? Those are some of the things that I'll touch upon briefly. In the early days of the web, our rich corporate culture was almost a hindrance to our foray into the digital world. We were so engrossed in maintaining our current revenues that we paid very little attention to our digital clients back then. They were a very small part of our revenues, therefore. Having said that, however, we were always a digital company in some way, shape, or form. We are in the business of delivering news, so we've always needed a reliable mechanism to get our news out there. In the days before the web, we actually created a proprietary network based on satellites. We'd send our content up to the satellites, which in turn would broadcast it down to our customers. We made large investments in setting up dish and other receiving equipment at each of our customer sites. Initially, we used this mechanism to move our news content, and later on, we leveraged this existing or additional bandwidth to actually start selling ads over our satellites. With the advent of the web, however, a lot of things changed. Cheaper delivery mechanisms became available, and we made the plunge to actually start moving our content over the web. But the web, although it opened up several opportunities, it came with its own set of challenges as well. Over our proprietary network, bandwidths were really never an issue. Latencies were well under our control. However, over the web, both of these were very serious problems. Customers with large bandwidths really had no issues getting our content, but customers with smaller bandwidths in Latin America or Asia had severe problems getting our content. So we had to work with third-party vendors to develop proprietary compression algorithms, develop point-to-point delivery systems so that we didn't have to rely solely on HTTP-based delivery to those clients. We worked with cloud vendors to put our content up in the cloud to get geographic diversity and get a handle on latencies by creating content distribution networks. Once we had made the plunge to use the web as our delivery mechanism and deprecate our satellite-based systems, we needed a strategy to get all of our content moving over the web. We had large amount of content, so that content had to be productized so that we could sell thin slices of content and not be forced to sell our full feeds in a shot. The content had to be enriched so that it was searchable through our distribution channels. Content had to be alertable, so our customers were notified when content of their interest became available. Oops. Wrong button. We are in the business of delivering news, and breaking news is of utmost importance to the AP. When a news story breaks, it's imperative that we get the story out to our customers in a timely manner. Otherwise, there's really no value to the broken story. As the broken story continues to develop, updates to this story have to be delivered in a timely manner as well. So we needed a strategy to make sure that our breaking news would move over the web without any latencies. And for this, we had to revamp a lot of our systems. We had to upgrade a lot of equipment out in the field. For example, for our video operations, we had to upgrade our cameras to be all digital. Our transmission systems had to be upgraded to be all digital. And we had to provide a completely digital workflow from cameras in the production end to consumers. We had large volumes of archival content sitting on tape and film. We needed a strategy to move this content over the web as well. Because of the large volumes, we actually contracted with third parties to help us digitize the binary aspects of this content, to digitize the actual photos and the actual videos. Now, we couldn't really rely on our third-party vendors to meet our editorial standards. Therefore, every piece of content that was ingested had to undergo editorial scrutiny before it was ready for consumption. So we needed to develop new workflows to ensure this content moved easily over the web. As the breadth of our content continued to grow, we were approached by our member newspapers, partners, and other third parties to host and sell their content. Again, we couldn't rely on our partners to meet our editorial standards. Therefore, that content had to be scrutinized as well. Now, no two partners were alike. Every partner had their own unique system. So we had to build a common ingestion platform, publish our specs to that platform to our partners so they could adhere to it, and ingest their content in bulk using our ingestion platforms. Once that content was ingested, we had to make sure that that content was segregated from ours. And eventually, when their content was sold, we had to make sure that it was sold with their copyrights rather than ours. Revenue generated by that content had to be shared with those partners. So we needed a strategy for several things here. We needed a strategy to move our breaking news over the web, a strategy to move our archival news and partner content over the web. So how did we go about implementing all of these strategies? Basically, we had to rethink just about everything, starting from our thought processes down to our workflows and all of the equipment, both in-house and out in the field. We started out by upgrading our editorial systems to be all digital. We updated equipment out in the field so that content was created in a digital format, obviating the need to do any transformations in our downstream distribution systems. We updated workflows so that editors would continue working on their content locally before it was ready for consumption. Once the editors were satisfied, with the click of a button, the content would be picked up from the editorial systems and dropped into this new pipeline that we had built. Simultaneously, content is being generated by third parties, and that content is delivered to us via our ingestion platforms. And these ingestion platforms take the content and drop it into the content pipeline as well. So what exactly was this content pipeline that we built? It's nothing more than a set of processes that content flows through before it's ready for consumption. The first and most important process in this pipeline is that of productization. This helps us create thin slices of content. So let me give you a quick example on how productization really works. For simplicity, say we have 3 saleable products: a political news product, a sports product, and say a subset of sports, a golf product. Now, for example, say a story of Obama playing golf comes into our system and gets dropped into the pipeline. As it starts to get productized, our algorithms scan the metadata of this story and figure out that this story is about Barack Obama, therefore political in nature, so the political product actually gets stamped on this piece of content. We figure out that this is a golf story, therefore the sports product and the golf product get put on this piece of content as well. Now, by virtue of stamping these products on this piece of content, we can make some intelligent decisions in our downstream systems on where and how this content gets routed. Once this piece of content has been productized successfully, it flows through a set of enrichment processes. This story was about Obama. So therefore, the name Barack Obama gets explicitly added or tagged to this story. If there are other well-known entities in this story, they get tagged to this piece of content as well. Geography tagging. Where did this story take place? Do we have the lat long of the location where it happened? When did it take place? Date, time information gets added to the story as well. Subject tagging. Is this story about disasters, flood, famines? Is it an aviation-related story? So as the story moves through each step of enrichment, more and more information gets added to the story, and this leads to a much richer search experience in our downstream distribution system. Once the story has been productized and enriched successfully, it goes through an alerting process. Customers have the ability to come into our systems and set up arbitrary search criteria for content of interest. As each piece of content flows through our pipeline, it gets matched with these search criteria, and if there's a match, our customer is notified. Or better still, this piece of content gets delivered to the customer. So once a story has gone through the pipeline, it's been productized, enriched, and alerted upon, it then gets dropped into our search engines. And these large enterprise-wide search engines are what really drive our distribution systems, which are made up of our web properties, our mobile properties, web feeds, the application programming interfaces, and so on. Customers come into our systems via our distribution systems. They can search, slice, dice content any different way they want and consume just the content they need. So by virtue of revamping this workflow, we had implemented our strategy to move all of our content, breaking news, archival news, partner news, over the web. Now that this was done, we had to give some serious thought to monetizing this content. We had to build or alter some of our existing business models to suit a wide range of customers, a new set of customers. In the past, we were used to selling subscriptions to our full feeds. We would send our feeds up to the satellites, which would broadcast it down to our customers, and the customers paid us a large sum of money to get this feed. They, in turn, would decide on what content they decided to choose to use or what content they choose to ignore. However, this newer set of customers demanded a much finer granularity of content and therefore wanted to pay us a much smaller amount of money for each of this content. So we had to hone our existing subscription models to be able to sell thin slices versus our full feeds. And by virtue of productizing our content up front, we could easily alter our subscription models to work on these thinner slices. Another set of customers demanded to pay for just the content they needed and nothing more. So for this class of customers, we created something called a metered billing model. So for example, they would say, we need to pay just for 500 pieces of content across your international news and entertainment news, and that's about it. So we created the metered model to work across these two subscription channels, and every time they would download a piece of content, it would tick the meter. So if the meter were to get exhausted within the span of a month, one of few things could happen. We could prevent the customer from performing any more downloads, which we normally avoid. We could let the customer continue downloading and bill the overages at a different rate or a predetermined rate. We also notify our salespeople that a meter has expired, which is an opportunity to call up the customer and upsell them into, say, a higher paying subscription model. So once we altered our business models to suit this wide range of use cases, we had to pay close attention to our revenue sharing models as well. But before we could really address revenue sharing, we had to address some serious digital rights ownership issues. Now, establishing ownerships for certain pieces of content is rather straightforward. A company or a person shooting a photo, or a company or a person writing a text story becomes the owner of that piece of content. A video, however, is a completely different animal. A saleable video is often made up of tiny little subclips, with each subclip being owned by a separate source. Therefore, the ownership of this saleable video cannot be established at the video level, but rather it has to be established at the subclip level. Now, add to this the complexity that each of the subclips have a different duration. So the algorithms for revenue sharing with videos were fairly complex. But we worked around those and created models for revenue sharing and built these robust business models for this wide range of users. Now that we'd successfully moved our content over the web and monetized our content, where do we see our future growth opportunities? Video comes to us with the largest number of challenges in terms of bandwidth requirements, storage requirements, rights management issues, revenue sharing, but that's where the growth is as well, both in online and broadcast quality videos. So to prepare for this growth, we made large investments to bolster up our video operations, both in-house and out in the field, by upgrading all of our equipment. We made investments to improve our site dedicated to our video assets, aparchive.com. Photo sales has been a fairly lucrative business for the AP. In the past, the bulk of our photo sales have come from a core group of news users. However, our research tells us now that future growth is going to be from outside of this core group of news users. So we've made large investments to bolster up our flagship site, apimages.com, to make it far friendlier to non-news consumers. Text, by far, is our largest revenue producer to date. However, our research tells us that future growth in text is forecast to be flat. But we are making large investments in apexchange.com, which is our site dedicated for the sale of text documents. So what are some consumer trends that we've seen develop over the few years? The news consumption life cycle typically has been a fairly simple one, with a news producer at the one end and a news consumer at the other. However, this economy has given rise to a third entity, the news aggregators, who collect news from a set of sources and present them as a single source to consumers. Now, this came up in our panel yesterday with the lawyers, where we had some trials and tribulations, and we weren't quite sure how to view these aggregators. Do we view them as a competitor and therefore a threat? Or do we really view them as partners? So after some trials, tribulations, after a rough road, we learned to work with these aggregators. We learned to create revenue sharing models with these news aggregators being part of the news consumption life cycle. And then there's this long tail of news consumers. This is a class of consumers that really have no allegiance to one or a set of publishers. They like to get their news from a wide range of publishers. And they typically spend very small sums of money across this wide range of publishers. Now, as publishers or news providers start to monetize their content and put up paywalls and authentication around their content, this creates for a very disjointed and a fragmented user experience for this class of consumers. Opportunities do exist today to create single sign-on mechanisms and a standard micropayment mechanism that works across a wide range of publishers, creating for a uniform and a unified user experience for this class of users. So in closing, we effectively created our strategies, implemented our strategies to move all of our content over the web. We successfully implemented strategies to monetize our content. Having done this, believe me, we haven't really arrived. We've only just gotten started. Thank you. With that, I'll take any questions that you may have. No? Yes, please.
Question about metadata. Obviously, in the case of text content, it's easy to get, easy to harvest out of the text content, Barack Obama played golf, etc.
Sure.
Photos, video, how do you do that? It's a matter of what's automated, what's human, both on current breaking news, 150,000 items a day, and archive.
Yeah.
How does that all get managed in real time?
And that's where our editorial staff comes in. So, all of this content that gets created has to go through editorial scrutiny. Our mantra is to get it out there fast, but it has to be accurate. So accuracy is much higher than getting it out there fast. So there is a human component to it. There are, we have a large range of editors sitting there scrutinizing content, adding metadata, and then, of course, we resort to technology. Once the metadata has been entered, our enrichment systems take over and then try to improve the quality of that metadata. Yes, yes. So we publish, the AP publishes something called a style book. And based on that style book, it's a sort of a guidelines that editors follow. And the style book is a document this thick. It goes through every possible nuance on how things should be entered from a grammatical perspective, from a media type perspective. That's pretty much all laid out in the style book. So yes, there are strict guidelines. Mm-hmm.
Based on what you know about their interest, there's a human component, I think, what you're saying, to tagging content appropriately so the system delivers the right stuff to that user.
Well, yes and no. So there is a human component to creating some basic metadata for content. For example, a piece of raw video is created out in the field. That piece of raw video comes into our editorial staff first. The editorial staff adds metadata, what is this raw video about, adds metadata to it, and then it flows through an enrichment process where the automated systems take over and fill in some additional gaps or standardize content. And from there on, the delivery is almost automated based on criteria that the users have set up. Users put in criteria, international news with Barack Obama is of interest to me. So when content that has been enriched or added by editors meets that criteria, that piece of content gets delivered to our customers. A large amount of metadata comes to us from the source itself. But once this content comes in, it still has to go through editorial scrutiny. There are certain things that we just won't allow on our sites. So that content has to be thrown out. And then there's some amount of enrichment which our editors may or may not do because of copyright infringements and all that stuff. But from third parties, mostly it's in a sense, it's quality control before the content is provided to our customers. Yes, please.
In my earlier years, I was a news photographer and photographed the Rodney King riots one night. And the next day, our newspaper got a call. The NRA would like to use one of your photographs for a full-page ad in USA Today. And we told them no. Is there an appeals process if somebody wants to use news photos outside the core news environment?
Well, I'm not sure about an appeals process, but there certainly is a licensing process. So when you set up a relationship with the AP, you come up with, how do you intend on using this photo? And that license determines obviously the costs, the duration for how long you can use the photos. So there definitely is a licensing process in place. But appealing a license or, if you go across the bounds of a license, then legal gets involved, and that's a little way above me at this point. Yes, please.
Last question.
Yeah. Yeah, so one of our distribution methods is definitely social media. A lot of our content, for example, when it gets created, there are feeds. We push that content out to social media. We have content feeding out to, say, Twitter. There are Facebook pages set up. And we have staff that actually manages that social media. And as for content sharing, again, there are licensing guidelines. Once customers get our piece of content, they are bound to, the extent to which they can actually share that content. Right? With that, thank you very much.